Okay, a very warm welcome to everybody joining us today. You are joining the Royal Entomological Society's Outreach Special Interest Group meeting. Yes, it's a long title, but believe it or not, we've actually shortened it in the last couple of years, so we can call it Ento Outreach for short. I am your host for the day, Ashleigh Whiffin, and I'm joining you from Edinburgh, Scotland, where I am the Assistant Curator of Entomology at NMS. National Museum of Scotland, but today I'm wearing my convener hat for the Royal Entomological Society. This discussion has come about because obviously during the last 8 months we've all been having a real strange, bizarre, crazy, difficult time with the pandemic going on, and obviously it's affected a host of different aspects of all our lives, and it's been really, really difficult for some of us. But on a positive note, the way that it's impacted the way we do entomological outreach has actually brought about some interesting changes, some really nice new approaches, and potentially some stuff that can improve the way that we do outreach in the future. So we've pulled together an exciting team of panelists for you today, and I'm really, really, really thrilled that they can all join us. So if you just want to give everybody a wave, folks, today we have Nick Baker, who I'm sure you're familiar with, wildlife presenter and author. We have Professor Helen Roy, who is also the Royal Entomological Society's president. And then we have Adam Hart for you, who is at the University of Gloucester. And we have the RES's very own Francisca Sconce, who heads up the outreach and engagement. We are also joined today by Richard Harrington, who I'm going to hand over just now, who will tell you a little bit more about the RES. So if you just share your slides for us.
Yeah, just doing that.
Brilliant.
Okay, so nice to see everybody. Thank you very much indeed for coming. The hat I've got on at the moment is my hat as coordinator of the Society's 22 special interest groups. What I want to do is just, in a couple of minutes, say something very briefly about the Society in the hope that those who aren't already members or fellows will consider becoming so. So that's interesting because it's not going on to the next slide when I press my button, Fran. Any idea why?
Can you press arrows as opposed to clicking?
That's what oh, there it goes now. It wasn't. It
Brilliant.
is now. Anyway, before the Society, I want to say a huge big thank you to two people. Firstly, Ashleigh for putting this meeting together and for convening the Outreach Special Interest Group. And secondly, to Fran, without whom all the IT wizardry that we need these days to do these things, as well as the overall coordination from the Society's end, wouldn't be possible. So many thanks to both of you and indeed to all of our panelists today. So, the Society. Its purpose, very simple, the improvement and diffusion of entomological science. That's straightforward enough, and it does that in a large number of ways. First of all, we have 7 international journals. Hopefully you're familiar with at least some of those, and also our quarterly colourful bulletin Antenna, which is free to all members of the Society. And the Society also produces these incredible keys, handbooks to the identification of British insects. We're incredibly lucky in the UK. We have the best guides in the world, I think, to the insects, and the ENTSOCs are very much up there amongst the very best. One extremely good reason for joining the Society is its amazing library and its very excellent librarian Val, who is always willing to help you with scanning articles, photocopying, literature searches, and all that sort of thing. So, special interest groups, there are currently 22 of them. They come and go. The idea is that they're relevant, up to date, and sometimes it's worthwhile retiring some and bringing new ones in. And if you ever notice a gap in the coverage of special interest groups, then please alert us and we'll be very, very pleased to consider introducing a new one, and you won't necessarily have to convene it. So do look out for gaps and let us know. The other meetings that the Society holds include regional meetings and our annual 2 to 3 day big Ento meeting. And you folks, apart from council and the meetings committee, are the very first to know that Ento 21 will be an entirely virtual meeting held from 23rd to 27th of August. The call for ideas for session topics is about to go out. So look out for that. It's going to be a very special meeting. So please do get those dates in your diary. And if you want to offer to organise a session, then please think about that. This meeting is all about outreach, and the Society is very keen in that area, very active in that area. I suspect that you're all pretty familiar with the insect festival that's held in the odd-numbered years in York, and also with National Insect Week, which is held in the even-numbered years. And even this year, we had the most fantastic virtual National Insect Week, and you'll hear all about that from Fran a little bit later on. The Society gets involved directly in conservation work through its co-ownership and management of the Daneway Banks Nature Reserve, jointly with the Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust. Very well worth a visit, especially in large blue season. So if you are interested in insect science, and the very fact that you're sitting there listening to me suggests that you probably are, and if you're not already a member or fellow of the Society, then please do consider joining. There are some very exciting developments going on in the Society at the moment, and I'm sure that you will benefit from being a member, and just as importantly, I'm sure that the Society will benefit from having you amongst its members. So please do consider joining, and if there's anything that you need to know, then contact any of us or go to the website, and hopefully that will tell you everything you need to know. So all I need to do now is say that we've got a fantastic couple of hours ahead. Please enjoy it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Richard. Great overview. So we will get straight on to our first panelist today, Nick Baker. Thank you so much for joining us, Nick. I had the pleasure to meet Nick virtually during lockdown and link up through his Instagram live broadcasts. So Nick, can you tell us a little bit about your experience? What made you start doing these broadcasts, and really how you found the whole experience, and yeah, a little bit about it.
Thanks, Ash. Yeah, I can tell you a lot about how this happened. It was a complete accident, like most things in my life. I was, like a lot of us, I lost all my work for the year in about a week and a half. The diary just emptied. Normally, I'm stressing about work, trying to get work. There's not a lot of work out there for a freelance naturalist. So, yeah, it's quite stressful at the best of times. And then when this happened, it couldn't get any lower. It was just suddenly there was nothing. And I just started maudling. And I was sitting there sort of flicking around with my phone, which is actually quite unlike me. And my daughter, who's 14, said, "Dad, you know you can go live on Instagram?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she goes, "Look, give it here." And she took my phone and she pressed a few buttons. And then suddenly, my followers of Instagram were there asking me questions. And it was just this amazing breakthrough. And what this then did, at a kind of a selfish level, it gave me a routine. I started connecting with a community of people that I'd sort of knew were there, but didn't really know them as individuals, didn't really understand how the technology works, because obviously I'm a dinosaur. So all this stuff was a massive breakthrough, and it's what I wanted to do all along. I mean, my career has been a weird one in the sense of I've always been doing outreach ever since my gran saw me not pulling to pieces crane flies, because that would be torture, watching the ants pull to pieces the crane flies on the patio and drag them off. And my family just didn't understand this peculiar trait. What can this boy possibly be getting out of this experience? And I would often bring family members down to my level and go, look, it's amazing. So that's presenting. And that went all the way through my academic career, well, not really a career, but my academic life, until I popped out the other end. I'm just a curious individual at many levels, to both senses of the word. And it was suddenly, whereas normally I'm relying on a broadcaster to give me the opportunity to say something. Usually that thing that I'm saying is controlled in some way. It's got to be a part of a narrative. It's got to be something that they've scripted to an extent. So it's quite limiting for someone who just wants to shout and jump for joy when he sees something amazing. So suddenly this engagement with a social media audience was incredible. It lifted me. It gave me a sort of a purpose. It gave me a routine, but equally accidentally found that other people got a lot out of it as well. And there's been some really nice feedback. And yeah, and that's how it started. It was just me waffling on as I'm doing right now. Nothing planned, nothing scripted. Just, I even took the phone that I was doing it on. I'd walk around the garden. I'd point out the highlights, and suddenly became aware that the insect. I already knew the insect world is right there. It's the most accessible science in some ways. There's, you know, that these small lives fit into our spaces so well. So there's always something, and to be denied that the stress and pressure of a professional life by force suddenly allowed me to enjoy myself at a level I haven't done since I was 10. So I would get up in the morning, I'd waddle around the garden, I would see a bee doing something cool in a flower, and I'd lean in and I'd watch that bee like I would have done when I was 10, when there was no pressures, there was no demands on my time, no sense of responsibility. I could just watch these things. You know, if the pond skater was looking at me funny, I could get down on my hands and knees and watch it for 3 hours if I wanted to. No one was going to tell me any different. And that was good for my head. And what I was experiencing, it was reflecting off the audience. They were saying, well, actually, this is really good for our heads as well. And we collectively have become more aware of nature generally this year. I think it's the year we discovered nature in our own gardens for a lot of us. And with that comes a cure, as it were, a kind of salvation from the madness of our anthropogenic world. Is suddenly we've got real stuff going on that we can relate to, and it suddenly becomes apparent that this idea of you know, the big C word, the COVID, is only our world. It's only affecting our world, really. Everything else is rolling on as before. And of course, we're noticing it now because we've got time to. So yeah, mental health is a big issue, and it's going to be a big issue for many years into the future because of what we've gone through collectively as a species this year. And it's been proven, there's data, there's studies that have been done that suggest engagement with nature, and obviously we're talking about insects at this level, but nature of any kind is good for you. It's good for you mentally, it's good for you physically. So in some ways, what started off as a very random, almost, it's very casual engagement with an audience, has turned into something really, really rather special. And I've made friends over this whole process. I've got to know people. Some of my community have got to know each other. They've all gone out. In fact, we've even had love blossoming. You know, 2 of my followers have met each other and are now a couple. You know, all this stuff has happened because of this situation we find ourselves in. I mean, I've been shouting about insects ever since I first, right from the beginning. But when I went to university, that's why I first bumped into the Royal Entomological Society as part of one of their earlier outreach experiments, which was the Young Entomologist Scheme, which then very quickly morphed into the Bug Club, which I co-founded with one of my academics at Exeter University, Clive Betts. And this was the beginning of that journey. But it's really, I've not really had anything. I mean, other than I get a copy of Antenna, and I do sort of poke around in that world. I've not had much of an active engagement with the Royal Entomological Society since those days. And this year, because of COVID, because of the fact we've all been forced to get to use this technology, as we're doing right now. I wouldn't have done this before because it would have meant a journey up to London. And obviously, as I've said, budgets are tight for a freelance naturalist, and that's as a £250 railway ticket from deepest, darkest Dartmoor. So it's one of those things. It's just not practical. Even though I'd love to, sometimes I've got responsibilities here. I've got family, I've got animals to look after, all that stuff. So actually, this allows this to happen. I'm not saying it's a replacement. I'd much rather be looking you directly in the eyes. I'd love to see the audience and bounce off an audience. But it's not a bad second best, really, is it? And the fact that it's engaged me with this community and other communities. I mean, I got to know Ash, for example. I didn't know who Ashleigh Whiffin was. I was introduced via my community, and we had Ash on. And who would have thought? There's a young dung beetle specialist. That was like music to my ears. And incidentally, Ash, I've got a present for you. I brought back from Japan. I've got one of these for you. I know you like a dung beetle, but anyway, it's all about that. It's about engaging, and this is a tool that's super, super useful. What else have I done with it? I've done live. It's got nothing. See, I infiltrate the world of popularity. So I infiltrate the bird fair, for example, where everyone's obsessed with large feathery things. Now, when I say large, I mean relatively large compared to the sort of subjects we're into. But I infiltrate and just tell them it's a bug fair. That's ultimately what it is, because it's fueling the interests that they are all chasing around through their binoculars. So I did the bird fair this year as a virtual thing, and I did it with my microscope. I just went down the river and the pond and collected a bunch of aquatic invertebrates. I stuck them in Petri dishes, and I did a very bumbly live virtual pond dip from my desk. And yes, it was a complete catastrophe at many levels, like the animals wouldn't do what they're supposed to do, but that's the fun. That's the bit that people engage with. People like things going wrong, and lots went wrong, but there was opportunity for people to engage and see someone who should know better, see a professional falling to pieces, and that in itself got them leaning in a bit closer, and we were able to show them stuff they could see in their own pond in a way they'd never seen it before, and that encourages people to look at the world through different eyes, through a different lens. So yeah, there's just a few of the way we engage, but more important, I found loads of young people out there that are just twiddling around looking for opportunities to engage with other entomologists. So Zander, who's on the screen at the moment, and Boy, I've been fortunate enough to bump into, but never had a chance to talk to properly when I was up in the Cairngorms. And actually having him on as a guest was wonderful. And that gives me such great hope and positivity for the future, because we need people like Zander, because he's going to be the Richard Harrington of the future. I'm convinced of it. So all in all, this has been a weird year, but it's been a good year at ways. In some, I've ended this year better than I would do a normal year, really. In some ways, I've connected with so many more people, and I intend to explore it and do more, and maybe do more for the Royal Entomological Society as well, because I feel that I've been a fellow for so long, I've not actually engaged, and now I can. So I'm waffling now. I know that, and that's what I do. So is that? How am I doing for time? Am I 15 minutes up yet?
Almost, but
almost. Anything else you want to know, Ash? I mean, I just
wanted to raise some of these testimonials because they're so fantastic. I mean, you've touched on it already, but yeah, if we can go back one or two slides. Yep, the one before that. So I think Simon summarised it perfectly here, because he said it was the perfect medicine, and that's what it is. When you have this opportunity to engage with others, it is like medicinal, isn't it? Nature is medicinal, as you were saying. I think that was lovely. But also the fact that you had on such a variety of guests, that made it really, really interesting, and I think probably attracted all sorts of folk to join. So you had our very own Dr. Tim Cockerell. You had Katrina Dainton, my pal from Forestry Commission. You had Zander. That was so great to have a youngster on. Yeah, that is the future. Really, really inspiring to see him. And then, of course,
sorry.
Go on it.
I loved it because I was feeding on, because that's the other thing, I get bored of of course I do, I get bored of my own voice. I don't like just talking continuously, but it was really lovely. You know, when you meet somebody who you immediately click with, you just know if they're into, if I meet somebody who's into wasps or ladybirds or ants or anything, it doesn't even have to be an insect. If they're into it that much, I want to know more. I want to know what makes them tick. And that's behind every entomologist has those moments. I remember I always just feel a little bit nervous standing up back in the old property. Was it Cromwell Road, wasn't it? Was it Cromwell Road? The old end stock building. Anyway, it was quite intimidating for a young student to go to this big, grand London townhouse with an oak-lined boardroom and pictures of past presidents in oil colours everywhere. And I just kind of, I got a little bit freaked out, really, to be honest with you. But what kept me sane was looking at all these worthy entomologists around me, all these silver-haired gentlemen, and that's really what they were back then. And the majority of those that I saw, anyway. Actually, underneath it all, they were all these scientists were actually, they all had a moment in their life cycle. They had a stage in their life where they were captured, and what captured them was something that was the same things that capture all of us. It was something amazing. It'd be like watching a butterfly emerge from a chrysalis for the first time, or watching a staphylinid beetle appear through the compost and chow down on some mites or something. Yeah, those are the sort of things. Those are the fundamental things that kicked everyone off. And it was great talking to Tim Cockrell, because I knew Tim did a lot of outreach. But what came out of this bizarre interview was he's a complete flea circus nut. I mean, how brilliant is that? So I had a wonderful time. And I obviously I've got something in common with them already, because I share an interest in insects. But suddenly it's like, I know nothing about flea circuses. And here was someone who got so much joy out of it. And we went down this particular rabbit hole. And itself was so entertaining. And I've never been able to do that on television, because television is so limited in so many ways. You can't talk to a guest for half an hour about all these whimsical things that got you going. But of course, in real life, if you went down the cafe, if it was open, or the pub, if it was open, this is the sort of conversation you'd have with somebody. If you met somebody who was into fleas and flea circuses, you'd be there all night. So it was lovely to do that. And I think that goes both ways. It was a really lovely experience, and I intend to keep them going. Maybe not every single day, because that's quite a responsibility. But I'll do as many as I can.
Yeah, that's great to hear, Nick. I think it will be much appreciated by the community that has developed because of these broadcasts. And I wanted to also just emphasise that it was more than kind of just being a fly on the wall to you having a chat with another insect nerd. It was the two-way participation as well, because Fran, if you go on to the next slide for us, a couple of these testimonials mentioned like how you really picked up on all the questions that people were putting in. You really tried to get back to everybody, answer everybody's questions or as much as possible. So yeah, many people have said that. And then this one I just wanted to pick up on from Jacob, because you influenced him so much, not only just to encourage him to get outside and enjoy nature more during the dark days, but he's actually gone on to do a diploma in entomology. So how incredible is that?
Oh gosh, do you know what? I didn't know that. That's the first time I get quite emotional. He asked me just the other day, is there a good book on book on carabids? And I'm just thinking, so I reached up to my bookshelf just up here and pulled down the Royal Entsoc guide I'm going to do it now. Look, I can recreate the moment. It's that easy. There we are. I've got the Guide to the Carabids, Volume 4, Part 2, 2nd edition, Handbook for the Identification of British Insects. There it is. And Jacob asked that, and he went, "Oh, brilliant! I didn't know how good it was. Okay, I'm going to get a copy." So I didn't realise he was doing a diploma. That is amazing news. Absolutely amazing.
Fantastic. So, and for me as well, Nick, I think going back to what you said earlier, like it was about having routine. So as well as for yourself, I think for many of us that watched or joined you, having that routine in the morning, if you were working from home or if you were furloughed, I was furloughed for 7 weeks, and it really helped me kind of start my day in a nice positive way. So thank you again for doing your broadcasts. They were really great, and I think they're an excellent tool and something that we should all be using a little bit more for this form of outreach. So lots of stuff to think about moving forward. with that, if anybody has any questions, we can add them to the Q&A at any point. We'll try to keep them mostly for the discussion, but if you drop them into the Q&A function at the bottom there, we will pick up on them as we go later on. But with that, I just want to say thank you very much, Nick. We're going to head over to Helen now.
Brilliant.
Helen,
Pleasure,
if you unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you very much, and it's really wonderful to be with you all today. And so much of what Nick had to say really resonated with me, although I can't believe it's taken lockdown for you to meet the legendary Ashleigh Whiffin. I mean, that's just incredible. So, but it was, yeah, fascinating to hear of your perspectives, and yeah, many of which I share from my childhood of delving around in compost heaps and the vegetable garden and finding all kinds of things that I wanted to share with my mum and my grandparents and anyone who would listen to me. And pretty much things are still very much the same, that anyone who is prepared to spend some time and chat about insects, it's just a fantastic way to spend time. And I think that, yeah, through lockdown, you're right, there were these opportunities for us to connect in ways that we haven't perhaps connected before. And for sure, one of the highlights for me was around this sharing stories event that we had in National Insect Week through the wonderful Royal Entomological Society. And this kind of came about because I'm really aware that not everyone has the same voice or the same, they're not empowered to have their voice amplified, if you like, in the same way as everyone else. And I had the great pleasure of, for a number of times, teaching for the Tropical Biology Association in East Africa. And I was teaching sort of basic entomology field skills. I love nothing more than being in the field and teaching. It's just absolutely incredible. And in the evenings, often the electricity would go down, the generator would go out, and we would just sit around chatting. And I'd often find myself sat around chatting with a group of women who had just the most amazing stories to share, but they hadn't really had the opportunity to share those stories. So these were master's students and with an interest in all things ecological. But to hear their stories of how they had got to where they were through their studies, their life experiences, and to think that it would just be so wonderful to hear those. And so I've had this sort of idea that I wanted to do more around sharing stories in entomology, and particularly hearing the voices of women from around the world. And this was just a really exciting opportunity to do that. And one of the people that we invited onto the panel was Perpetua Akiti. And Perpetua Akiti is in Makerere University in Uganda. She is just inspiring, and I've had the amazing opportunity to have, actually I met her first in Southampton in the UK. We were both at a butterfly conservation conference, and that was fantastic. But then subsequently she was also teaching on the same courses in Kibale Forest in Uganda, and it just was amazing to meet her. Her knowledge is vast. The stories she has to tell of these diverse butterflies, for instance, in Kibale Forest was just absolutely captivating. But it's not just the butterflies, her general knowledge of insects and entomology just had all the students absolutely enthralled. And so, you know, it would have been really difficult had we not had these online technologies for Perpetua and I to meet through a panel and to share stories in entomology. Actually, one of the stories we didn't share, which is slightly outside of entomology, but nevertheless it's sort of there, was that one evening after a day of teaching out in the field, we had to go and hide in the lab to pick the ticks off one another. So that was a very bonding moment. We suddenly saw that we were absolutely infested. But nonetheless, it was great. We carried on talking about entomology, and we went back out to the moth trap afterwards. And she is just the most inspiring person. So to be able to meet with her on this panel with these other incredible women, Ashleigh, Esther, and also Serian, and all brought together by the wonderful Fran, to be able to spend some time together. And it was amazing, wasn't it, Ashleigh? We were just chatting away, all kinds of things. And I thought, this is exactly what I was dreaming of in terms of coming together and chatting. And so I really want to do more of this and think of many different ways in which we can hear from, in particular, women in entomology from around the world, and make sure their voices are heard loud and clear, and the stories that they have to tell are shared widely. So that was a really, really fantastic event that I was delighted to be involved with. But there were many other examples of the ways in which, through lockdown, social media and virtual technologies provided a kind of lifeline to one another to connect. And one of the things I've been meaning to do for a very long time was to get out in the garden and moth trap. And I just, it's a simple thing to do, really. And I don't know why I hadn't found the time to do it before. But straight away in lockdown, I thought, this is it. I'm getting out there. And of course, then well, at first it wasn't too bad. There weren't that many moths coming to the moth trap. So it was kind of achievable. I could get through the catch. And then it got crazy. And actually, people on Twitter were amazing at helping in the identification of moths. So I learned so much from this community of people who were willing to take a look at my often quite poor photos and help me to find their way. And even actually the wonderful Richard Harrington, and many of you will know him from his field guides, even sent me through the post a little a laminated sheet of the pugs to try and get me going down this dark, deep hole of looking at these really, really tiny moths. And I did manage to identify a few, but it was just, those kind gestures amongst entomologists. It was really, really fantastic. And then anybody who would ask me if I would come online and do some kind of event, I said yes to everybody. And another highlight was with my daughter as a young leader for the brownies. And so she said, oh, will you come on and do an event for the brownies on Zoom? And actually it was just hilarious, because I had some hawk moths from the trap in the morning, and holding them on my hand and trying to get them up to the camera, and them literally going everywhere. But it kind of worked, and there were some of the moths that were more obliging than others in terms of being able to show them on the camera. So that was absolutely fantastic. So I really enjoyed those opportunities. But I think another really inspiring aspect was, just as Nick has said, about people getting out into their gardens and recording the wildlife on their doorstep. And one of the projects that I'm also involved with at the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology is the pollinator monitoring scheme. And within that, we have this initiative called the Flower Insect Timed Counts, where we ask people to go and count the insects visiting a set of different flowers in a small quadrat over 10 minutes. And what was just absolutely incredible is we've just looked at all of the data that's come in throughout 2020, and we have double the number of fit counts this year than we did in 2019. So we've had a submission of 1,838 fit counts completed across the UK by people recording the insects visiting flowers over 10 minutes. And you can find out lots more information about that on the Pollinator Monitoring Scheme website. But they counted a staggering 18,970 insects. And so, people for sure have not been idle through lockdown. They've taken these opportunities to get out in their garden, to get involved, and to connect with other people, to share the excitement of entomology. And I've just been delighted to have the opportunity to be a small part of that. And I think in terms of the well-being aspects that Nick was also saying, and we saw in the quotes from some of the people mentioned already, it's been so important to people from a mental health perspective to have that connection with nature. And I'm really looking forward to in the coming months and years, us continuing in this way and keeping connected with one another. And I know that the Royal Entomological Society is going to do everything possible to ensure that some of these positive aspects that have come out of what's been a really difficult time for everyone will continue going, and will have a legacy going forward and into the future. And I'm certainly looking forward to sharing more stories in the coming years and decades. So thank you very much, Ashleigh. I don't know how long I've been either, and I could go on for longer, but yeah,
That was
that's
perfect.
probably
Thank you.
enough for me. But thank you.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Can I just say, actually, one last thing? It's amazing to see on the chat all of the people who've joined us, you know, from
I
all
wanted
around
to
the
say that too.
world, and the diversity of insects. I saw something pop up about leaf miners, and I thought, I want to speak to that person. It's just fantastic that you're all with us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that as well. It's fantastic. We've got folks from North America, from a whole host of places outside of the UK, which is wonderful. We have 82 of you joining us today as well, which is definitely double the usual number of attendees for a special interest group meeting. So Richard will no doubt be very, very excited about this. We'll head on over to Adam now. So Adam's going to tell us about the Big Wasp survey and what he was doing on that during lockdown.
Thanks, Ashleigh. Yeah, so I'm going to focus on one of the citizen science campaigns that I'm involved with. So citizen science is basically a partnership between sort of a professional scientist that wants to find something out and some sort of group within the public that's going to help. And we set the Big Wasp survey up in 2017. This is me and Syrian Sumner, who you actually saw on the previous slide. So Syrian gets another shout out here. We set this up in 2017, and we got about 1,500 people to act as our sampling buddies effectively across the country. And towards the end of August every year, we get them to put out a couple of wasp traps in their back garden, in which they catch lots of wasp workers, which regrettably do die. But what they then do is send them off to us, and we identify them. And through that, we've been able to build up all sorts of abundance and distribution diagrams. And it's actually proved to be a really effective way of doing this. Within the first year, we worked out that 2 weeks of this form of data collection, using about 1,300 people, was the equivalent of 40 years of dedicated surveying up to that point. We're able to recreate those distribution maps. It's a really effective and efficient way of doing that. What we've discovered, though, is that those people are really, really engaged with what we're doing. They are super engagers. And we really discovered that this summer, because when COVID sort of started rearing its head in March and April, Syrian and I kind of had a phone conversation. And we have young children at home, both of us. We've got spouses that work. It was a very busy time of the year, and we were like, we're not going to run it this year. Yeah, we'll just call it. There's no point. And about 3 days later, we just kind of messaged each other going, this is ridiculous. We'll just run it. What are we doing? We just need to run it differently, because the big problem that we had was not that this wasn't COVID safe, right? There's nothing safer than going in your garden and having a look for wasps, right? The big problem was that we needed people to send us the samples. And we had at the time the post office was shut. We had no idea how that was going to work. We had to have a plan in place. We can't have thousands of dead wasps in people's freezers that aren't being identified. That's not ethical. That's not good science. We had a problem. What do we do? And we thought, well, hang on a minute. Maybe we can get people to identify the wasps themselves. This is the big problem with this project, right? If we can't ID the wasp properly, it's sunk. So maybe we get them to ID them themselves. Would they even be remotely willing to do that? So we sent out an email to 1,300 people, and within 1 hour, I had seen there was a problem with the email, and it was just auto replies, because within 1 hour, we had north of 650 replies within an hour. And every one of those people said that they would be delighted to help. It was unbelievable. It was like this big sort of coiled spring of wasp-based enthusiasm out there. And we just sent this email out, and it just pinged. It was unbelievable. And we thought, okay, we could be onto a winner here. But we do have a problem, because I don't know if you can ping onto the next slide there, Ashleigh. Normally what we do with the ID is they send us the wasps, and I'll level with you, we have a problem because we have an awful lot of wasps we have to ID, and they're processed through with students in labs as part of student-based projects. We run public workshops, COVID alarms ringing, where we get lots of people together, and it's brilliant, right? We show people how to ID it, and we get 20 people in a room all breathing over each other on a microscope. I mean, it's just exactly what we can't be doing. So how are we going to actually get them to ID them? And the big problem is there's about 4 or 5 species of social wasps that commonly come in these traps at that time of year. And they're not too difficult to ID, but they are tricky. You do have to get them really under a lens. You have to look at them carefully. You have to kind of take your time about it and bring these things together. So we were working at how we could do that. And if you could ping on the next slide there, we got really lucky. We had an amazing student, Jess Perry. She's here on the slide. She was really interested in getting involved with citizen science. She desperately wanted to get involved with this project and do something, meaningful and applied, because she's doing an applied ecology master's, like some people in the audience. Hello to the University of Gloucester students that have joined us. And, you know, she wanted to do a project that had sort of an end result. And so we started talking, and I said, you know, maybe you could make us some identification tools that these very keen to be engaged people could use. And so she did, from scratch with no experience of it. She's put together a website, she's made videos, fabulous, using phones and tripods and bits of string and yogurt pots and things. We came up with all kinds of arrangements to film this, and the end results are just great. They're exactly what you would see when you're trying to do this at home. They talk you through the process. We field tested them with people from BWARS and stuff, just to make sure we were on the right lines. And we tested them with a few other people, and they were wonderful. They really worked, and we thought, well, this is great. Then we had we wrote to our super engagers and said to people, listen, you know, could you help us by we just need the first 50 just to go through this and see if it works. And, you know, 3 seconds later, we'd filled our quota. The spring had sprung again, and they went through. They gave us some really good feedback, you know, some robust at times feedback, which was really helpful. But I felt that we had that kind of trust with them. It felt very much like a partnership. They felt they could turn around and say, listen, this video is terrible. You need to redo that. You know, these pictures don't work for us. It was really useful. And one of them said, I'm lost. We need a flowchart. Why haven't you got a flowchart? Isn't that the first thing you would have done? And it's like, yeah, absolutely. We actually do have the flowchart here. Why haven't we put it online? So it was just this really useful. I really felt like I was engaging with them much more than just them sending us parcels and, you know, us sending an email out and saying, here's a paper. You know, this actually felt much more like citizen science. It felt more like the partnership that we talk about, but doesn't always develop. So that was just really, really good. So we had it there. We had our people ready. The time came around, they collected their wasps, and it was this great moment of truth, because we also realized that we have no idea if they're going to do it right. So we had a subsample of them send us their wasps that they'd ID'd and their IDs, and then we had other people that didn't do that, and they came and we sat down and ID'd them. Now, at the public workshops that we run, the identification and classification correctness, the accuracy was 86%. With the wasps that they'd done themselves, with exactly the same thing, it was 96%. So it had gone from basically 85% to 96%. In other words, not only did this spare us free post, did it spare Syrian getting sacks of wasps, because everyone pads them out and stuff. So the actual wasps, you know, they'll crush down into a jar, but all the gubbins that comes with them just fill, you know, UCL post room is like, oh God. I get little rotting envelopes sent to me in late October, you know, through my posting. All of that's gone. We don't have to have students lined up. We don't have to have these public workshops, which are an absolute nightmare to arrange and try to timetable and schedule and organize. It's like you're an event manager all the time. Not only do we get rid of that, but we actually increase our identification accuracy by 10%. So it was just a real object lesson. But for me, what really, I think actually, if you can go on to the next slide, I've just got a few, some of the results. For me, what really made this into, you know, citizen science is always about outreach to a certain extent, right? Because we have to sell our projects and we have to get people involved and everything. But this was really working for that, because people were really getting involved with this. We were getting lots of emails back saying, this is amazing. I've never looked at a wasp that closely before. They're beautiful, aren't they? And you go, yeah, they are. They kind of, and suddenly people were sort of realizing that all the kind of head, thorax, abdomen they vaguely learnt from school, actually it was there in front of them, and they could see the legs joining and that kind of type of structure that you only appreciate when you get up close. But they enjoyed it. The vast majority of them said that they would not only do it again, they would love to do it again. Even the ones that weren't that keen, most of them said they would do it again, which, you know, is good enough for our means. But it was wonderful to have a lot of people that were enthused. But people just messaged us. You know, we're still catching up with a backlog of emails from people just saying, thank you, you know, thank you for the opportunity to do this. And, you know, that was just, I was so pleased that Syrian and I dug ourselves out of that little hole that we were in at one point, where it wasn't laziness exactly. It was just, there's a lot of stuff we can't control right now, but we can control this by simply not doing it, right? That's the easiest thing to do. Let's just tank it and run away. And actually by doing this, not only have we got data that help us keep the Big Wasp Survey long-term data set running without a substantial hole, which is useful, but also what we've found now is a better way of doing it that's more cost efficient and time efficient and is more engaging. And, you know, we're going to be writing this up with Jess and hopefully perhaps there are some other projects which we can try and use this sort of way of doing it. I don't think every insect group is going to lend itself to this form of ID. Obviously, you know, some stuff gets really quite complicated quite quickly, but for some things this just really worked. And yeah, for me it was an absolute eye-opener, because I don't think either of us thought it was really going to work. And I can remember telling Helen about this project back in 2017, and she was quite skeptical that the entire project would work, and I was kind of thinking she might be right. Now I'm being skeptical about this working, and all I can say is that the public's enthusiasm for wasps is greater than we might think, actually, or at least the subsection of people that we managed to reach is. So yeah, that was my lessons from COVID, and I totally echo what people have said. I found, I live in quite a rural area, and I sort of I feel like I'm engaged with nature, but I realized in April, May time, when every day I was missing, you know, if I'd spent a day where I didn't go out for a long walk and, you know, go for the skylarks and go and try and spot things, I realized I missed it. And that is a really big positive that I've taken from the last 9 months. Actually, I go with what Nick says. You sort of rediscover that childhood kind of pond dipping, log turning kind of joy. You know, it was always there, but it's come to the surface a lot more over the last 9 months, and I've seen that in a lot of other people too. And I think that's, if we can draw positive, you can draw positives if you're sound like England cricket captain now, but you know, you can always pull something good out of it, and I think that's something that's really been very positive out of the last 9 months for me and for lots of other people. So yeah, if you want to take part in the Big Wasp survey, we will be advertising for participants next year. We particularly need people representing urban areas and around national parks. So Nick, we might be calling on you actually. Yeah, I know that part of the world pretty well, so that looks ideal. We have a big hole that I think you could fill with a wasp trap. So thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you, Adam. Would you be able to drop a link to that in the chat for people?
Yeah,
so
I certainly can. Yeah.
I am amazed by that accuracy that you got. That's so fantastic, and really shows that it pays off if you invest in the resources that you provide people with. That you can really effectively teach the ID remotely. Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And it was also, I mean, some of the things that were coming out early, which we then integrated in. It's like we take a lot of things for granted. Like, for example, when you say, "Oh, look at the side of the thorax," well, a lot of people don't know what you're talking about, but also we know almost instinctively how to pick up an insect and look at the side of the thorax. But if you have no experience of that, you kind of don't. So, you know, we built that into the videos a little bit too. Just, you know, you pick it up here, you hold it like that, even down to using a hand lens sort of properly rather than you know, that sort of stuff. But you can do it in a nice, gentle way, and yeah, it works.
So good. Thank you very much, Adam.
It is.
We're perfectly on schedule right now. So last but not least, let's hand over to Fran to tell us more about how National Insect Week went virtually this year.
Hello all. So for those who I haven't met you before, I'm Fran. I work at the Royal Entomological Society doing outreach and engagement. I've been there for a few years now. So I'll just do a little summary of what our Insect Week this year became. And I'll also touch on some of our plans for next year. And I also have a poll that I also want you to answer in due course as well, some questions about next year. So I'm looking forward to all of your engagement about that. So this year was different, as we all know, and I can go on about negative things, but I won't, because so far this meeting has been so positive, and we've been focusing on the things we've learned from this year and all the new ways of doing things. I think that's really important, to focus on those things. So we had our National Insect Week, which usually happens every 2 years, and it was in June. And we actually did virtual events, which was not something I was expecting to do in maybe even April, maybe even the beginning of May. I didn't think virtual events could really be a thing, but gradually we realized, Luke and I, that actually virtual events are a really important thing. And we actually realized that there were so many people around the UK and also around the world who were doing online engagement with insects. And so we did do a call out, and I think it was possibly late May or early June, to see if anyone was able to do events in that week. And there were already people who were doing events relating to the insects in that week as well. So we actually, as part of our National Insect Week website, we had an area where we promoted virtual events. And I put thank you all on the slide, because I really want to thank everyone who got involved in some way. And we've heard from Nick about Instagram Live, but where we saw Facebook Lives, we saw Zooms, we saw all these different types of things, including Helen's sharing stories events. But we actually ended up with 50 virtual events over the week, which is fantastic. As a society, we also shared some new online resources about insects. So I've got, I've put 2 things about garden entomology. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. I'm going to put the cursor hopefully near where you can see it. So we had, with the Field Studies Council, we developed several leaflets about insects that you might find in a UK garden. So particular beetles, particular pollinators, but obviously different types of pollinators, not just the bees. And we also developed an intriguing insects leaflet, which was developed with our Director of Science, Jim Hardy. He gets lots of inquiries to our society very regularly about what is this bug, essentially. And it could be from anyone around the world, generally from the UK. So he put together a kind of, I think it was a top 10 or top 12 insect species that we find get sent to us, including things like the maybug and a carpet beetle and things that are quite common in the UK at least. So we made that to try and help people identify the common things. And I was also really excited to see that our garden entomology booklets that we've had as a paper copy for many years, I think it was developed originally by 2 scientists at Reading University. We've gone through several editions of it, and this year we actually made it downloadable online, which took more time than you might expect because of image licenses and all that kind of stuff. But I was so glad to see it being available to be downloaded. So those were some of the online resources we made available. I've also mentioned on the slide there that we have a photography competition. So that opened actually in National Insect Week, and that was a photography competition open to all non-professional photographers all around the world. And it closed a couple of months ago, and I think Ashleigh's actually on the judging panel for that. So I'm looking forward to seeing the winning images when they appear, hopefully in the new year. I'm really looking forward to sharing all of those with you. So that was really this year. We had increased social media activity as well, and we had some really interesting engagement from some people that I would never normally expect to engage with entomology. We had some art galleries, we had London orchestras engaging, we had a video, I think it was from the London Symphony or a different orchestra who were doing Flight of the Bumblebee, which was unbelievable. So we got some new engagement from new people, and I'd really like to build on that for future years, particularly from arts and humanities organisations who are often really good partners to reach new audiences. So thinking forward to next year, so I'll just do a little summary of what we're currently working on right now. So I was just talking yesterday about some educational resources that Luke has been developing for several years, and we're about to try and get those finished with final design. We're also planning a podcast for the Royal Entomological Society. And we've had various discussions, but we quite like this to be a sort of chain reaction style podcast where one person interviews another person who then nominates, interviews another person, and so on. So we're looking actually for people who might want to help us with producing and editing that. So if anyone has any contacts, please get in touch. I'm aware this is a large audience, so my email address is on that slide if anyone is interested. And we're also looking to do some online outreach events, hopefully about once or twice a month next year. And I put in bold there, looking for collaborators. So again, do get in touch with me if you want to get involved and collaborate on that. We're already talking to the British Ecological Society, and tomorrow I'm talking to the Amateur Entomological Society and City Nature about different events. I've put in brackets EntoSci 21. EntoSci is our event for 14 to 18-year-olds. And it's all about careers in entomology and what entomology is. And we postponed it this year, but I'm talking to our partner, Harper Adams University, about it being online. They have an online platform, and we could actually engage with many more people than we normally do. We normally have just over 250 people who come to that event in person. But I think there could be some really good opportunities to make that online. It's usually at the end of April, so it's scheduled for the end of April. And I've got a big picture there of Instar. So Instar is our magazine for young entomologists for 7+. So Adam has been strongly involved with this, and we're hopefully putting together another issue for that for next year. But the new innovation is that we're planning a magazine for an older age group, which we're going to call Pupa. We're quite excited about this, but I'm not going to say too much more. But we're looking to develop that next year. We've got several people who want to be involved, and I'm very excited about that. So if there are any young writers who are interested, do get in touch with me, and I'll put you in touch with the editors. We've agreed with that. Okay, so I wanted, Ashleigh, if this was a good moment, to do a poll about National Insect Week and Insect Festival and the timings of that, if that would be a good time to do that.
Yeah, this is a great time to do that.
Okay. I haven't done polls before, but I have prepared the poll, so let's see what happens.
Fantastic.
Okay. I'm not sure if I've allowed panelists to vote.
Yeah, I think I can vote. Oh, no, I can't.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't click that button.
We can send you our choices privately.
So you can see 3 questions there about whether National Insect Week should be every year. Oh, look, those are people are voting. Thank you so much. And whether we should actually call it National or just simply Insect Week. And then the last thing is, does it matter if Insect Festival, which is our event that usually happens in the opposite year to Insect Week, can that be combined with an Insect Week? Does it matter if those 2 branded names come together or not? You can see 30, nearly 40 people of 75 have voted. Thank you so much. Should we just wait a little bit longer, Ashleigh?
Yeah, please don't be shy. Nobody can see what you're voting. So.
No, I can just see lots of nice numbers coming in, so thank you very much.
So this is something that we discussed not that long ago, because there is a Outreach and Development Committee with the RES, which Fran and I and Helen and Adam all sit on. Adam is our new chair. It might be a good time now to actually mention, if you're interested in being involved with this committee and helping us out, there are a couple of vacancies coming out. So if you want to get in touch with Adam directly, perhaps Adam can drop his email address into the chat for us, then that would be fantastic. So yeah, we talk about many of these issues that we're chatting about today, including events like Entosci, Insect Festival. So these are a couple of things we thought about as a group. So it's really great to have a wider pool of people to ask these questions to. So thank you very much for helping Fran out today.
Okay, thank you. I think we've got 65 of the 74 who have voted, so thank you so much for that. I'm going to end the poll now, if that's a good moment, Ashleigh. And then I will stop sharing my screen, and I assume we're going on to general discussion and questions.
Yes. Thanks very much for dealing with all the tech for us, Fran. Thank you very much for all giving us a brief insight. I would have loved to hear from you all for even longer. Or do you want to discuss those results now, Fran?
Sorry, I didn't actually realise it would show right now, but if you're interested, I could talk about that now. Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's go ahead. So we might as well. So 89% say that National Insect Week should be every year. That's a very clear response there. So we got fairly close, 51% saying just Insect Week, or 40% saying to keep National Insect Week. So thank you for that indication. I think it was similar on our committee when we chatted about that as well. And then the last question was, can Insect Festival happen within National Insect Week? And that's 68%. Looks like a resounding yes to me there. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to stop sharing the results and then over to Ashleigh.
Thanks. I can't remember what I was saying. Basically, this will now just be our time. Thank you very much. Yeah, that was a brief insight from you. I would have loved to hear about each of these individual projects for a lot longer, but we do just have an hour left. If anybody has questions specific to any of the approaches or projects that our panelists have already talked about, please drop those in the chat. We've got a few already, but you can also just ask any general questions that relate to Ento outreach, and potentially also we'll watch the chat too. They don't necessarily need to be questions, but they can be suggestions as well. So this is a safe space for us to have these discussions. Please don't be shy, throw anything into the mix. So let's get started with just a couple that we've had already. There was actually 2 on a very similar theme that were asking about how to do these virtual workshops with specimens under a microscope. So Nick, you already mentioned this. Can you explain a little bit more about the kind of kit that you were using when you did it? If you unmute yourself.
Dinosaur Baker again. Yeah, I would unplug it and show you, but unfortunately I've got my DSLR, my camera, my posh camera with a clean feed, plug straight in. So that's number one, is you can up your visual quality by using a proper camera as opposed to the little tiny dots that's stuck on your screen, and that straight away creates just a better feel, a better look. I know I've got to get some blinds fitted. That's the sun never comes out on Dartmoor in the winter, so it's typical, isn't it? But anyway, the point is you create a better studio straight away, so that you've created the right atmosphere. But the actual, I've just got a teaching microscope. It's a Zeiss teaching microscope next to me. It's a STEMI. I've got a little camera, like an Axio cam, stuck on the top of it. So, and I plug it. Now, initially, I was struggling to get any of this stuff working with my computer. And then a gamer friend of mine said, "Have you tried a little thing called a Cam Link?" And it's just a little thing. It's, I can't remember how much it cost me now, but I got it online during lockdown, and it's plug and play, and it's even I can use it. And as soon as you've plugged that into either that camera or that camera, I haven't got two. If I had two, I could switch between the two and do live visual mixing. But it's brilliant. I can show, potentially show you absolutely anything that I'm seeing under that microscope. And I did it this year. I did it with the bird fair. I've done sort of slightly more clunky workarounds with Instagram, where I've actually photographed them, stuck them in my little photo library, then pulled them up while I'm talking about them. That sort of works. It's hard work. Whereas actually I can just switch the microscope on and do it. And it's very simple. If I can do it, anyone can do it. I'm literally doing it in my office with my computer, a cable, an HDMI cable and a Cam Link, and that is it. The rest of it comes from the teacher. It's about how you engage. But yeah, it's fun. Don't be afraid of the flawless presentation. Never happens, so forget it straight away. Everyone expects you to be able to present without umming and ahhing, without doing all those things that we do every day in conversation. And when you're sharing the stage with a live insect, it's going to go wrong, but equally that insect's going to have all the attention, and people are going to enjoy it. It's accessible. People like to, and this is the beauty of live TV. This is what we're doing. We're doing live TV, guys. What's brilliant about that is that when live TV is so well rehearsed that it might as well be recorded, it's not interesting. So if you want to engage people, if they see someone who's a professional of many years of insect wrangling experience, losing a caddisfly out of the petri dish across the desk, that gives people reassurance that what they're doing is the same. It's okay. It's all right. We're all doing it. And I can see lots of you nodding, so it doesn't get much more professional than this panel. Everyone's nodding and agreeing, so that's it. So yeah, it's dead easy to do. It's really simple.
I was just going to add to that something that amusing happened to me just before the lockdown, when we were able to do these things. We were at a big marquee demonstrating orchid mantises, the lovely close-up, and someone asked a question. We had a big female, and someone asked the question, "Oh, can they fly?" And I said, yeah, I believe they can fly. They don't fly very often. I've never seen one fly. And literally at that point, this took off, which even the guy with them had never seen, and went onto the marquee. And we managed to engage quite a lot of the audience for about 40 minutes afterwards. We went on a mantid hunt, and we found her again. But that was brilliant, because it suddenly got you talking to them. You got in the safe space as everyone, and it was really, really nice. So yeah, when things go wrong, it can be really good. Yeah.
I had a similar one with pre-COVID with a carrion beetle workshop, and we had a couple of live ones in boxes, and they said, "Oh, can we take the lids off?" I'm like, yeah, sure. It's not that warm in here. They might not fly. They flew, so we had 2 or 3 on the loose, like around this luckily small room. We weren't outdoors, but yeah, it adds to the event, doesn't it? Makes memories. I also just wanted to add myself that I think people at the moment are much more kind of not tolerant, but appreciative that things aren't polished. They don't actually want the polished thing, and that we are recording and saving lots of these events and workshops forever. They're being saved onto YouTube and various other platforms, and everybody's just a little bit more okay with that now. It can be a bit nerve-wracking as a presenter. I'm certainly very critical of myself, so that's something to overcome, but something that I think is a real winner, that we should all embrace. So another question in here was from Alison, she says, oh no, that was another one about Zoom. So I think we've answered that one, Alison. If we haven't, let me know. Another one here from Maria. We have had many members who have been willing to engage with virtual events, but a minority, mainly older ones, are very resistant and just keep waiting to return to in-person events. I can relate to this. Are there any tips for getting people involved who are reluctant? Some don't seem to have the technology and say they have computers without cameras or mics, for example. We don't want to leave these people out. Yeah, I completely agree, Maria, and this is an issue I think that many of us are facing. And if the panel have any ideas and suggestions about how we can try and still engage with members of the community that are struggling with the tech or just a reluctance to participate, throw your suggestions in now. Fran.
Oh, sorry, Nick. I was just going to say, from experience of, this is random, but from a garden society experience, what I went to last year, and then I subsequently heard this year, they've had really good interaction online. Just having one figurehead person who kind of encourages all the others and almost walks them through on the phone, the old-fashioned landline phone, is often the way to do this. But yeah, if there's an issue of someone just not having the technology, that's a whole nother ball game. And I think I'm mindful that often socioeconomic things can mean that we just don't have technology available as well. So yeah, I'll let Nick say something as well.
I was about to say the same sort of thing, and I was also going to say something that I suddenly realised it's an online workshop in it right there, but of course that doesn't work, does it? I think it's changing. I mean, it might not change quick enough for some, but yeah, if you've got the, I mean, my dad, for example, is a classic example. My dad will not use, he turns his mobile off just to save the batteries. You know, he's one of those. He's worked out this year that he can actually do Instagram. He doesn't do it, but he uses it to listen into the Instagram lives, for example. So he didn't even realise he had the technology. So it's one of the things that is explore that first to see, because actually most of the phones that are going out of shops nowadays have some facility for doing this. So it is there has to be a way. You know, there is a workshop to be done on this that help those folk, I think. But obviously online may not be. I agree that the walkthrough, the old analog walkthrough, might be the way forward. But I suspect the opportunities are there. It's just the awareness of the technology may not be. Yeah, that's all I can really add to it, really.
No, thanks, Nick. I agree. Adam.
I would say as well that we need to sort of look towards the future a little bit here, because I think we're very much, I've had 3 emails coming in the last hour asking me to do science festivals next year, and they're all going to be online. And I'm thinking, you're talking about a science festival that's going to happen in September 2021, and you're already saying it's going to be online. I totally understand that from a planning perspective, but from a COVID perspective, that feels unnecessarily pessimistic. Come March, come April time, we right now, if the insects were playing ball, right now we could do outdoor events with people with the right risk assessment and things, even if we're in a quite heavy tier area, which fortunately I'm not, but even if we were, we could. So I think it's tempting for us to get sort of entrenched in this online world and find ways around it. But actually, come March, April, May, June, who knows? I mean, you know, no one's going to predict the future, right? We don't know what's going to happen next week, but come July time, which is the sort of height of the insect season in this country, it doesn't feel ridiculous to suggest that we might have a few face-to-face events. So I think we need to be careful that we don't end up sort of backing ourselves into an online world that we don't need to be in, actually.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
But yeah, I mean, throw those words back in my face in June when we're in the middle of a...
Hopefully not. Yeah. Hopefully not. But I wonder if this is going to lead to a more blended approach, whereby I think obviously we all know that we're reaching larger audiences by doing things virtually, but we are still missing people out. And I think so it's really important to have those physical events, as you say, Adam, also for our own sanity and our enjoyment, because those are the bits that drive us, that motivate us. But also we are potentially reaching people that feel more comfortable engaging in a virtual way. Potentially it's a bit of a barrier going in person, whether it's physically or perhaps socially not wanting to participate in those ways. So a blended approach would be really nice, and it's something I'd like to see a lot more of. Helen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and Louisa Willows from DEFRA in the chat makes a comment as well around increasing accessibility and diverse audiences. And I think you're quite right that having a variety of different approaches to engage people is for sure a fantastic way to go ahead, and thinking about how we can bring down some of the barriers that aren't just about the sort of barriers about using technology, but also maybe about other kind of barriers as well that prevent people being able to really get involved with natural history and all that brings. But I was also going to say around specifically to my dad as well is he's more than capable of using all of these online technologies, and he's absolutely amazing, and we share a lot of stories about our various natural history observations on quite a regular basis. And through lockdown in particular, he got involved in recording plants. I feel it's a slight rebellion to me that he didn't go down the insect route, but nevertheless it was a joy to see the sort of chalk grassland photos that he was sending to me. And I said to him, why don't you start putting them on iRecord, Dad? Why don't you start recording them? And he said, no, I don't think I'm not going to do that. And actually what it took was just, and also sometimes he was sending me ones that I definitely could not identify. And so I was then forwarding them to other people. And I was saying, there's platforms you can use for this, Dad, so you can get the ID direct. But actually what he needed was that intermediary. And I think that that's another way that, for example, there will be grandchildren and children and others in the community who are more than happy to bring other people on board with helping them on that sort of virtual space. So yeah, I think that has been great. I've now connected my dad to a couple of experts who he can go direct to, rather than me looking at the photo and thinking I have no idea, and then sending it on to a botanist and finding out it's a nettle or something.
It's always so reassuring to hear you say things like that, Helen. It makes me very happy. Following on from that, Louisa was asking if we have any suggestions of how to create press opportunities from an online event. So obviously there's been lots of these online events, but Fran, maybe you've got any suggestions here about press opportunities to link in with your online events.
Hi, yeah, often I have to be honest, often Luke is the one who does the press for the society, and I think he has, his way of doing it is he has several contacts already that he knows within different newspapers, different online media, different television, radio, etc. And I think my understanding is that if we have an event before it, we often prepare a press release and then put it out on news wires, which are then picked up by said journalists. But often the other way of doing it is to promote your event online on social media. So if you have those active accounts, if you have that active presence online, you're more likely to be picked up by different journalists as such. That's all I can really say on that.
No, that's great. Thanks, Fran. But to link in with that, we have another question that's asking which of the platforms, because there are quite a few growing every year, do we feel are the best to engage the public with citizen science and science communication in general?
I was teaching this morning, in fact, hello to those. There's a number of students on here who could answer that question, because we spent about an hour and a half dissecting out the different strengths and weaknesses of different social media platforms for citizen science and for science communication. I mean, at the moment, Facebook seems to be a bit of a leader, just because it's established, it's familiar. You can set up pages very easily. There's pre-existing groups you can hook into. You don't want 10 million people that have seen your message if you actually only need 100 really engaged people, and it's that idea of sort of impact and reach that's quite important. Instagram is kind of the big new kid on the block, and TikTok, which we didn't go into too much about it, but Instagram's got an awful lot of opportunities there, as Nick has found, and they're just bringing in more and more functionality for that too. So I think in terms of reaching people, probably Instagram is the sort of new kind of shiny thing. Facebook is your reliable thing. Twitter is great for those people that are on Twitter and use it, but actually we'd be kidding ourselves if we thought, I mean, as much as I enjoy Twitter, its penetrance is quite low and its demographics are unfavorable for a lot of activities. So I think, Facebook does seem to be the big platform still for this sort of stuff, but YouTube is increasingly being used by a lot of people as a social media platform. I don't use YouTube like that, but lots of people do, and they have an account there and they're commenting and they're talking to each other on it and things. So I would say also having a backup video on that would be my take for that. But it depends on the audience, right? If you're trying to do citizen science, it depends who you're trying to reach. Your marketing, right? You've got to understand what your audience want, and sometimes there'll be audiences that aren't going to engage with these things. Sometimes they will be.
Nick, did you have a comment there?
Yeah, I just find sometimes, I mean, I'm feeling my way. I mean, obviously the whole thing was an accident, so Instagram just happened to be something I find very positive, and it's very pictorial, so you don't have to, you know, have to read through loads of stuff if you don't want to. Often it's just an image that sparks an interest. And I had an amazing example. In fact, you might have been watching it, Ash, when my wife walked in on one of my Instagram broadcasts holding a cowpat that had been passed to her over the fence by my neighbour who'd just been for a walk in over the moor, and she said, "Well, we're not sure what this is. What do you think?" And it was an Australian flatworm, one of the introduced Australian flatworms. It was actually a new record for the national. I mean, we knew they had them in the West Country. We didn't know we had them in the national park, which is actually quite scary because they're actually, you know, to have them out there is. And it was in the newspapers the next day. It was in. I can't remember, it was in one of the more respectful newspapers, and my picture was there. It was like it had just gone ping, 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 and it was a story. So with that sort of power of engagement, you know, if you've got a good story, which I know entomologists have loads of good stories, it's just a case of finding that handle and pinging it out there and just getting the right person at the right time. So you can collect your little stable of media people on your social media feeds and just make sure they see it, and off it goes if they think it's good enough. And this was a worm. This was a flatworm that went, well, it didn't quite go viral, but it nearly did. So it was
a
quite a
beetle,
result for me. Yeah, it was a surprise bit of outreach.
Helen.
This is a complete aside, but the thought of the cowpat being handed over the fence reminded me of my dead deer experience on on some of the lockdown walks, because my daughters and I would do this sort of same circuit on a regular basis, and there was this dead muntjac, and I was desperate to turn it over because I'd been reading Ashleigh's Sylphidae Atlas and Steve Lane's Hysteridae Atlas, and I thought there's for sure going to be some amazing insects on this, and my daughter said, "Don't you dare." She said, "Just walk on by the dead deer." And then of course, because we're doing that same route day in day out, I said to her, "Please just let me turn it over and then I'll stop going on about it." And she let me turn it over. I found a nationally scarce beetle. I had no idea it was a nationally scarce beetle, but I sent it through to Steve Lane, and he identified it as just that. It was neither a Hysteridae nor a Sylphidae. It was a Domestidae, but never mind. It was very exciting. But my daughter said that she felt that I had the aroma of dead deer for the rest of the walk, but I feel I didn't really. But it was so worth it, and I would do it again. Only I would do it sooner that time. But she did share that on Instagram with her friends of her mother's strange behavior during lockdown. But can I just show you, as another aside completely, having mentioned my dad and his things, like he's just sent me he's been doing paintings of his wildflowers.
Oh wow,
yeah.
Yeah,
I know. So I mean, if he can do that, he can definitely come online for a FSC Biolinks course or similar.
I knew Helen was amazing, but she's just gone up another notch on my scale. She turns over dead deer and wants to do it. I think that's brilliant.
Before we leave the social media chat, I just wanted to acknowledge here that the same question from earlier also asked if we could see the RES using TikTok. Adam's jumped in and said, absolutely, we should. So if there are any volunteers that want to help.
We haven't done it yet, but if anyone wants to let us know about how best to do that, because I haven't tried it yet. I'm currently running a lot of our social media, so please, if you get in touch with I'll put my email address in the chat. So I think we'd like some help on that, just to make sure that we don't do it completely wrong. But we'd love to take part.
Excellent.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think at the moment, and onwards into the future, the Royal Entomological Society is really keen to hear all of your ideas and the ways that you might want to get involved or things that you might like to see us doing differently. We're really open to all of your ideas. I mean, we might have to manage expectations about how much we can do and what we will do over time, but we'll really try hard to do the things that matter to you as the entomological community and as members and fellows. And if you're not a member or fellow, please join and become part of our community. You're part of it anyway, but why not get involved right at the very heart? It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Richard, on that note, we have a question for you that involves the SIGs. So what is the mechanism to lead these groups and how to access them?
Well, to access them, certainly they're all listed on the website, and all the Society's events are listed on the website. But as I said at the start, we're extremely keen to make sure that they reflect sort of current trends in entomology, and it may well be that there are SIGs there that are no longer necessary, and there are missing ones that need starting. So as I said, please make any suggestions. And absolutely every SIG convener, each of the 22 has got a convener. Sometimes that convener organises several meetings. Sometimes the convenership changes after every meeting. But every single SIG convener would absolutely welcome a message from somebody saying that they are willing to be involved in some way. And if that particular person who's messaged in is actually keen to organise a meeting or to be a SIG convener, I'm sure that the current one will store that information in a place that it will come to the fore at the point that they decide to step down. So the thing is just to get in touch. The information's on the website, and we put it out via other means as well. So just keep an eye, and anything you want or anything you feel you can contribute, just get in touch and we'll be absolutely delighted to hear.
Thank you, Richard. We have a great question here from Scott. Thanks for joining us, Scott. He says that, I think we have so many people who would host events or do events for free online. Do you think it would be possible to set up a RES page for a finder entomologist to help people organise these? Fran.
Sorry, I was just about to write that down. I'm assuming, from what I understand, what that means is almost like an online directory of people who might want to. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, Scott. Hi, Scott. I think if you're Scott Dwyer, hi there. I think that's a really good idea. So I think we've talked in the past about having online profiles. We have profiles of some of our honorary fellows and the kind of key presidents and trustees on our website, but I think it would be good. That's a really good idea. So I'm writing that down. I'm going to have a think about it, and I might get in touch with you, Scott, for more details. Anyone else?
Yes, Scott's also said that this could be a really useful way of facilitating, kind of putting people in touch, particularly if you're early career. I know it can be quite daunting, that kind of element. Yeah, Adam.
Yeah, this is so ages ago I contacted another organisation with the word royal in it to try and set up this idea of like a sort of almost dating service where you've got loads of people that want to talk about stuff, and you've got loads of schools and loads of people that want people to talk about stuff. And quite a lot of the time when I go and do those activities, they're always saying, who else would, we need more people, who else would come? So it feels like there's this kind of scope to have a sort of, dating service is perhaps the wrong word, but a sort of a way of hooking people up that can offer different services and people that want them. So I think there's a lot of mileage in this potentially, because there's a lot of people that want to get involved with outreach that struggle a little bit to get the foot in the door, and there's an awful lot of people that are after those activities. So obviously a lot of that would work very well face to face, so perhaps something for the future, but online things would work too.
Yeah, specifically virtually, I'm sure many of you have heard about it already, but there is a project called Skype a Scientist. So if you're not familiar with that, they're always looking for more scientists to get involved, to share their work and be part of that pool of experts and communicators. So check that out. Helen.
Yeah, actually that as well, through the summer there was a fantastic initiative run by the research council's I'm a Scientist, and you could sign up to join school events. There was some national insect week events during that. And that was I really enjoyed that. So, because I think as soon as we went into lockdown, some of my panic was around not having the opportunities to go out and talk to people and share stories in entomology. And so I kind of, everything that I was asked if I would get involved with, I did. And indeed, some of the things I didn't even get asked, I was just volunteering to say, please could I get involved? Please could I do something? And the I'm a Scientist was one of those things. And it was really fantastic. A class would sign up for a session, and then you would drop in alongside some other scientists and just take questions for 20 minutes, 25 minutes from that class of school children or the Brownie group or whoever it was. And I think that those online platforms are really great, and maybe there's a way in which we can use those even more within entomology and connect people.
Yeah, great suggestion there, Helen. I'm just reading through the questions at the same time. Alison asks, what are each of the panelists' favourite activities to first engage young people? And she's specifically asking primary school age. So engaging these youngsters with insects. Helen, you first.
So you can't do better than a wonderful ladybird walk. I mean, that everyone is going to agree with that, you know, you cannot do better than that. And I have just had great fun going out with many groups of young children to look for ladybirds, and it works, I think, for all ages as well. So I think there's various levels, and I get really excited when on Twitter I'll see that a school group send me a message to say that they're going out on a ladybird hunt, and I can then join virtually through Twitter and answer some questions as well. And I just really like being involved and being part of it. And it does actually, they remind me of when my same 19-year-old daughter with the dead deer, I went along to her rainbow group when she was about 5, and we'd survived. We'd seen lots of ladybirds out and about on our walk, and we'd come back to the hall for some questions, and I felt like we were nearly at the end. All the children had survived the experience and seemed to be happy. I said, any final questions? And my daughter said, you haven't told everybody about how the sisters will eat their brothers. And I thought, yeah, they're 5 and 6, Ella. I was going to save them from that story of the male killing bacteria, but now let's end on that note. And that was a lot of fun. And actually, I think that they did really engage with it, and I should have included it. She was right. But yeah, ladybirds, that's the way to start.
How did I know you would say that? Nick, have you got?
Well, I think that's a definite taxonomic bias there, I think, Helen. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same thing, really, which is it doesn't matter how, what your academic prowess is. Ultimately, there was a moment where a real thing really captured you. So I do things like, I always, I've got some woodland. My current thing is woodland. I'm really into isopods. I know it's like swearing in church when you're talking to the RES of this, because technically, obviously, it's got a few too many legs. But proto insects, I guess we could call them. But I've got a box of these, and I just love showing living things to living humans. And that's it. That first moment of engagement, and then engage them with toilet humour. Anything to do with bums is good. Bums is always good. And I know it sounds really puerile, but we all are at some level. So it's brilliant. So I use dragonfly jet propulsion when you're talking about dragonfly nymphs, and the fact that they've got amazing feeding reactions. And then, did you know the same thing that allows them to shoot water out of their bottom? Imagine if you could do that in the bath for a start. Imagine being able to shoot water out your bottom so fast that you could stand up, in fact, shoot yourself out of bath. That's what you could do if you were a dragonfly. But then I talk about things like, well, actually, if you could control that and hold that in, but still clench, and you've got a hydrostatic skeleton, you can fire your jaws out really fast. So that talented bottom doesn't only allow them to breathe, to avoid predation, but it also allows them to predate. So straight away, you've got a simple bit of puerile information. You can use the word bum, but you can use it to unlock loads of other wonderful things. And I know I'm preaching to the converted to an extent, but there's a temptation to go too fancy, use a lot of jargon. We've all done it today, at some level, because we're comfortable talking to each other. But when you're engaging with a new audience, it's really basic stuff. It's like, that is a brilliant little insect. this is what it does, and find its story, find its narrative, and find the hooks. And you learn by experience. The more you do it, the more you realise which gags work and which handles work. And that's it, really. It's not rocket science, but it's often overlooked. It's so simple that we often overthink it.
Absolutely. And like you say, it's the person in the storytelling that makes it as well. So we're all most comfortable when we're sharing our favourite and most special insect groups. So yeah, carrion beetles and dung beetles for me. Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I still think that for ease, reliability and instant impact, it's hard to beat a bright light, a white sheet and a few egg boxes. And, you know, get those amazing moths. People who have never done that never fail to be amazed by the extraordinary variety. And I know it's LEPs again, but they really are the gateway very often. And it's hard to beat, I think. And Helen's found that recently during lockdown, that moth traps are absolutely marvellous. I was at a meeting, a Zoom meeting last night, of the Bedfordshire, Nottinghamshire and Northampton, the other one, Wildlife Trusts. And during that meeting, the speaker had at some point asked school children to draw their favourite insect. And I'm very sorry to say, Helen, that ladybirds were just pipped by butterflies. Butterflies and ladybirds between them, I think, formed about 75–80%. I was actually surprised it wasn't even more than that, but the tail was a huge variety of other insects. It wasn't just dragonflies at the other end. There were all sorts of most unexpected things further down the queue. But anyway, light traps, I think, are absolutely fantastic for getting people started.
And some ladybirds come to light traps, I just have to say.
And carrion beetles too. And in the UK at least, didn't moth traps sell out during lockdown? Wasn't there a shortage? So that's one thing that everybody can do if they've got a back garden or a park nearby and neighbours that don't mind. Adam?
Yeah, I was going to make something go a bit more exotic, actually. So a very successful tool that I found is a leaf cutting ant. So I mean, I'm quite lucky. I've got a few colonies at the lab, and one of them we've got kind of packed up so we can move it around. And I remember the first time I took this to a school, I had this kind of PowerPoint prepared, and I was going to go through all this stuff, and it's hopeless, right? You set up a leaf cutting ant nest, you've got a nice bridge with them all walking around doing what they're doing, and you just get groups of kids over, and you just answer questions. You don't need any material. The material's in front of you. And the brilliant thing is, I mean, it's the same with an observation colony of bees or something. As soon as people start looking at it, they start asking all the questions that you should be asking as a scientist, and there'll be genuinely, some of the questions that they've asked have spurred research projects that I've gone on to do, because they're looking at things with a new way of new eyes, basically. And they'll ask me a question, and I'll be there going, "Oh yes, they do this, they do this, they do that. Yes, brilliant." And then they'll ask me a question, and I'll just stare blankly at them and go, "I have no idea how they do that." And it's such an honest way of doing it, but it's just so brilliant, because you see that kind of light come on, and it's the same as with all these things. It's trying to. Everybody's fascinated with stuff that's little when they're little. It's just rekindling that. And I think, like Nick says, having something in front of you, having a living thing, having something that people can see is just really super important. And it's brilliant. And you totally should have turned that deer over. I had a dead muntjac near me that I checked on a regular basis. It was fabulous. So you should your daughter's wrong. turn the dead muntjac. That should be our rally cry.
Nick?
I'm just going to back up what Adam was saying. I mean, I've recently, I don't do it anymore, but I was teaching. I was a fellow of natural history at a college in Hampshire, and I just filled the lab with animals, basically, just because it's what I do. And it was lovely sitting in my office, which was at the back of the lab. I could hear the students as they all gather for the first 5 minutes. They'd all go straight to the back, because there'd be some tarantulas there'd be some silk moths, there'd be something to look at, and you can hear the questions that they want the answers to. And there's this temptation as teachers, as mentors, to sit there and lecture in the old school way, but actually sometimes it's a case of just producing a thing and letting the energy, the natural questioning, because you have the structures, what you want to get out of this, but if you allow them to ask the questions, you can answer their questions and then build in life cycles or ecology or whatever it is you're teaching. I remember a very right at the very beginning of RES, Entomological Society outreach, going into the schools with the Bug Club, which is now unfortunately passed on to the Amateur Entomological Society. That's another thing. I had a very unruly inner city primary school audience struggling so much with trying to get my message across. It wasn't working. I had a big pickle jar full of great diving beetles as one of my demonstrations, and I remember just popping a worm in there. In the early days of this same visual thing, I then was able to put that on a visualizer and then ping it up onto the wall, so they were watching this predation happening on the side of the building, and the jaws all dropped. They were yucky. They just thought, wow, it's disgusting. Then the questions happened, and everyone went, yeah. Suddenly there was order, and I think that's it. It's a case of of letting the subject lead, and then putting your stuff in. But yeah, really good stuff.
Helen.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with all that you're saying, including turning over the dead muntjac at the earliest opportunity. It was a lot more unsavory a few days later. But there's some really fascinating comments coming through on the chat, and one that just struck me was around the shift of power from the expert to the audience, and it kind of relates as well to what Nick was saying. It's sort of shifting the power from the expert to the audience and the natural world. And certainly when I'm out on a ladybird walk or doing some field teaching, it's that natural world that's playing out around you that tells the stories and inspires the questions from the people who are there, and it's just so engaging. And yeah, maybe we'll see some more. I know that there were some sort of virtual field events through lockdown, with people going out with cameras into their gardens and taking questions as they wandered around, and Nick's Instagram Live is of course a fantastic example of that, and maybe we can be doing more of that as well in the coming months and years.
I've got a question here I'd just like to touch on from Dave Clark at London Zoo. He suggests that when it comes to doing real events again, could the Society look at using public organisations such as museums and zoos with invertebrate collections? And it's been done successfully in the past for National Insect Week. So yeah, Helen, would you like to start on that one?
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. I think that museums are just a fantastic resource, and every time I interact with people from within museums such as Ashleigh, but also at the Oxford University Natural History Museum, the Natural History Museum in London, the generosity of the curators and others to open their collections for everyone to take a look is just absolutely amazing. And yeah, so I think we should definitely be doing more. And I think that just as well, you know, we should be doing more in partnership. We should all just be working together more with other learned societies, with the museums, with other organizations. For me, it's been a great pleasure contributing to the FSC Biolinks, and I'm sure for other people as well. It's given me an opportunity to share my enthusiasm to other and new audiences, and that partnership working is so important. And yeah, I wanted to say, yeah, the museums are a fantastic part of that.
Absolutely. The more partnerships, the better. It will only make our outreach stronger. Zoos obviously are perfect for doing that hands-on, live, interactive stuff, which sadly, as a curator, I have to say, does go down a lot more, a lot better when you've got something live. Obviously, I have used live insects with some of my previous events too. And this year we were partnering with National Insect Week, and we had some actual big public events lined up. So it's possible, and next time I hope that we'll be able to support in a physical way. Richard, you had your hand up a moment ago. Did you have a comment?
No, it was really only going back to what to the questions that Adam says that he gets. I mean, I had a great one. It's kind of past now, but I had a really great one when we were showing some children red admiral caterpillars on nettles. Why don't the caterpillars get stung? And I thought, what a good question. I said, you know, I've been interested in butterflies and moths since I was about your age, and I haven't got the faintest idea. I must go home and find out. And I'm not sure I ever did. So after this meeting, I'm going to. Anybody know?
Oh, I think it's a fantastic question, and you know, there's so much that I enjoy about engaging with other people, and it is those questions that come back to us that we don't have the answers to that I really enjoy, because that's another opportunity to learn even more. And I think after this, Richard, we should see who's fastest in finding the answer to that question when we're all going to be Googling frantically, and yeah, see if it varies between the caterpillars and the aphids, whether they have different ways of managing these, what we might think of as quite a hostile environment.
We have a couple more questions here. Adam, do you want to take Alison's question? This is relating to one of her previous ones. She says, there are issues with a lack of field guides for pupils to use in a classroom. I know self-discovery opportunities. How do you even start to engage them effectively and meaningfully?
Yeah, that's quite a challenge. The other thing, of course, is it depends on the age group as well. You might have some really excellent field guides that would work brilliantly for a 16-year-old that might not work so well for a 7 or an 8-year-old. I think one of the things that I've found, I think quite quickly sometimes, is that entomology can be quite scary, not just because of all the jargon, but because there's just so much out there. And you know, I always tell the story that I stayed in Brazil with it was on it was a coffee farm plantation basically, and there were these little hemipteran bugs everywhere mating, billions of them, and they were very, very distinctive, red and black. And the guy that has the office next to the person who was hosting us is like the Brazilian expert on them. So I just took 2 in a pot. This guy actually, that's his field site. And I said, oh, what are these? And he said, I've no idea, never seen them before in my life. Put them on the pile like of stuff to be ID'd. It's incredibly complex. And I think the best thing to do is to try and pick something, to get people to engage with something straightforward. So, you know, a lot of people will say, oh, bumblebees, but once, you know, in principle, yes. In practice, they can be really fiddly as well. So I guess, well, they're going to rear their heads again, aren't they? But I think, and Helen's, you know, I think ladybirds are a very good way of getting people into the idea, because idea is really about careful observation and looking, isn't it, and getting into it. And I think ladybirds are probably a winning group for getting people into that idea, because they're relatively easy to find. But maybe Helen's going to disagree with me and say that actually ladybirds are a terrible group. But let's see.
No, I'm going to absolutely agree with you that ladybirds are just the most fantastic group. But I do also agree with what's already been said as well around the stories that there are for different insects. And for example, I sent a picture to Ashleigh when I was on holiday on Islay, and a sylphid beetle had landed on the window frame in a quite thankfully quiet restaurant, because I did feel the need then to share my excitement of this beetle, which I misidentified and Ashleigh corrected for me. I'd got it in the right family, but got it wrong after that. But when you think about the stories behind these little carrion feeding beetles, for instance, it's just incredible that they're, you know, we might think of them associated with these dead and decaying animals, and there they are doing wonderful things in terms of caring for their young. And that it's just fascinating stories for many different insects. And so I think that, you know, and then once you start to think about ladybirds and ladybird parasites, well, you're taken into the world of wasps and little phorid flies and other things as well. So I think that those stories, and all of the insects have a story to tell. And I watched my fantastic PhD student, Imogen, who works on slugs, running some slug workshops through lockdown. And she just captivated her audiences around slugs. And I mean, I was very fond of slugs already, but I was even more so after watching her fantastic workshops. So yeah, I think it's about the stories.
Muted. Absolutely. Nick.
And so the question, was it about access to field guides, or it was, wasn't it? Something to do with that as well?
Oh, it was actually.
Yeah. But it's all relevant, because the stories are that, you know, because actually just the fact that you know, Helen has trouble identifying a carrion beetle is brilliantly reassuring for me, for everybody. So we're all in this together. There's nothing easy about, I mean, it's easy to be fascinated. That's the most important thing, but there's nothing easy about getting down to species level with a group that is massive. So you know, as Adam was saying, pick an easy group, but then there's so much. I mean, I have quite an extensive bookshelf, and this is just one of them. But I'm finding for field teaching, and I'm slightly biased, you see, I'm creeping around Helen already. But in fact, I downloaded this when I had the joy of interviewing Helen on Springwatch. And these apps, I've got field guides on there. That's the Ladybird one. That's actually a recording app, but it has an ID section, which is dead useful. It's all sorted out for you. There's things on you know, there's a field guide to bees. I've got moths. I've got 2 moth field guides here. I've got a butterfly field guide. I've got I record grasshoppers. I've got a bat detector. That's not really relevant. I've got things like ID apps, which I've been introduced to by clients that I've taken out into the field. Have gone, oh, I use this app. It's really good, and it uses AI. And okay, you can't trust it 100%, but it's a great doorway into making people be bothered to actually get down and look at it closely and take a picture or hold the phone so it tries to get the features, and then it will ID it for you, or it might get to family level. In fact, the one I'm talking about is something called Seek, which I've just been introduced to this year, and it's phenomenal actually. But I mean, you've got to question it, and it doesn't always get it right, but it puts you more often than not into the right ballpark. And that sort of resource, which I carry around on my hip with a communication device. I'm that old that I remember phones being things that were attached to walls with coily cables. The whole idea that I can carry a library, an interactive library around with me is phenomenal. And these are resources that you just can't overlook. They're really, really, really useful.
Definitely. Oh, I've got 2 hands. Adam, you first.
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate that point, Google Lens is really quite good for moths. I said almost every moth I see posted on Twitter, I put through that, and it's very often right. But I'm testing at the moment with a colleague the 4 biggest plant apps that are free and available on both platforms. So we've got 4 master students. We're testing them with something like 6,000 images of verified, identified plants. And so very shortly, I think possibly by just after Christmas, we should have for sure the data on exactly how good these apps are across a whole range of groups. But they are very, very good, and they're only going to get better. Certainly
we'll all be out of a job.
Clear picture. Well, that's when it comes down to telling the story.
Yeah.
You know, the app's not going to tell you something interesting in an engaging way. Well, yet I suppose.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm delighted to see the apps being mentioned, and I think they're absolutely fantastic. And when you think about how so many people have got involved through the apps, it's just absolutely wonderful. And I noticed that Louisa Willows has mentioned that there will indeed be a UK Pollinator Monitoring Scheme app next year, and I'm really excited following the discussions around that, and people will be able to record their flower insect time counts on an app. There's butterfly apps where you can do timed counts, and they're just fantastic. And as Nick said, the resources that go alongside them are just great too. And there was another comment from Jackie Chaplow from the UKCH mentioning about specimen banks, and there's other ways in which you can get involved with providing resources as well as using the resources. But I just also did want to mention the FSC fold-out charts, because I do find them brilliant. And if you can use them for Christmas and birthday cards as well. I mean, they're just perfect. And they're easy to carry out in your rucksack when you're going out and about, alongside your phone app. So I think there are some really fantastic resources out there. And I think although it can seem overwhelming with just the sheer diversity of insects that are out there, and that's just amazing and beautiful as well, there is a community who are there waiting to help you. They're waiting to share their excitement around the particular insects that they can identify and help you to identify identify. And I saw that with the moth trapping community on Twitter. And you can see that. Choose your group, choose what fascinates you, whether it be the dead deer, or whether it be your pond that might be going a bit stagnant in your back garden, or the dung pat that's handed over your garden fence. Choose your area of interest, and there will be people there who will be waiting to help you. And of course, Royal Entomological Society will have a lot of those people who can point you in the right direction.
We have a couple more questions that I'm quite keen for us to get to before we wrap things up. I can't believe how quickly this has gone. So we've got one from David here that's asking how we deal with tricky people when we're doing this engagement online, whether that's just through social media or if you're doing a workshop. How do we deal with those problem individuals that we all run into? For example, those who claim you're wrong because they read something, some article, something on Facebook. So how do you approach that? Helen?
Well, thankfully, there are very few, I would say, in the way of tricky individuals. But having said that, I can remember, for example, just as an example, being at a Latitude Festival event and leading a ladybird walk for a group of school children. And of course, mostly children are really interested, but I could tell there was this group within the group who were really not at all interested. And actually then it becomes my campaign to make them interested, to bring them on board and to find something, because I know that there's going to be something out there amongst the stories or the diversity that is going to be captivating them in one way or another. And so it's about finding that and then bringing them into it. So that's my approach.
I like that approach. Nick?
I agree. It's usually the troublemakers in a group are just not stimulated enough. So they're usually a bit of, hyper brilliant in some way. So it's about finding that thing and throwing it back at them. And when it's online, you can try all that, and sometimes you just can't. You can't just turn them off. but yeah, you're right. There's very few. There's something really nice about this environment that actually. It already filtered, because those that are going to be troublemakers are usually can't be bothered. They want an easy kill. They don't want to sit through stuff. So the fact that you do something like this, it filters. Well, it's got watch the box. There'll be loads of troublemakers all of a sudden. As well. But it already automatically filters out the troublemakers, because you've got to invest some time into this in order to be here in the first place. So yeah.
Richard?
Yeah, I mean, the example of a troublemaker that was mentioned then was somebody who says you're wrong, to which I think I would say, well, you might well be right. I think I'm right, but you might be right, because it's very rarely possible to be 100% certain. And I think the most worrying people are the people who are 100% certain. And you can then begin to get a conversation going on science and how some theories which were accepted by pretty much everybody eventually turn out to be wrong and get replaced. So you can get nice conversations going along if you can engage. That sort of being awkward is perhaps different from some of the other being awkwards that are being talked about, but sometimes you can get an opportunity out of awkwardness.
Yeah, I like that tactic. Seeing any negative interactions as an opportunity to convert someone or, share something else. Adam?
One of the things that can happen sometimes particularly after events that have gone well, is that everyone wants to talk to you afterwards, and that's really cool, but you can end up with sort of one person sometimes kind of dominating your time, and that can be quite tricky, and that's when it's really useful to have some props. So if you've got some insects people can look at, or some ants or something set up, what I tend to do is I'll sort of answer you get a sense for these things after a while, and you think, okay, this guy's going to sit here and talk me to death if I'm not careful. And you can go, listen, there's quite a lot of people here. I tell you what, let's catch up on this in a bit, but at the moment, why don't you go and take a look at these things? And it just kind of, it's like you're handing them over to someone else. It's just that someone else happens to be 10,000 ants going around doing their business, but it sort of diverts their attention away. And I found that quite useful, because, and I saw Helen nodding quite vigorously when I said that, it is quite a thing, isn't it, sometimes, and you don't want to put them off, but after a while you know, it is quite rude after a while, and you have to shut it down, but you don't want to be doing it in a nasty way. But having props there that you can kind of divert people to can be really useful. Yeah.
Mistrust the self-proclaimed expert is generally a good rule of thumb, isn't it? I quite like the this idea that you're wrong is actually is rightfully very stimulating. Wasps are obviously a pet subject of mine, and Adam will know this one. Is there's always somebody who says, "What's the point of wasp?" And to me, that is the most beautiful excuse to launch off on. It's a springboard. It's what we do. I mean, I've been doing it all my life, which is sticking up for the underdog is always much more fun than going with the obvious. So if I was to hold up a hamster now, you'd get a few people go, "No, it's nice," but generally speaking, it wouldn't necessarily. It's okay. It's a hamster. It's acceptable. But if I was to pull out a stag beetle, straight away your audience is split. You've got the ones that go "wow," and then you've got the ones that go "ugh," and then both of those reactions you can work with. What you can't do is the one down the middle, which is "that's all right." You know, that's the one that doesn't work. So actually taking those negatives and making them the positive, accentuating the positives, taking those negatives and making them positive is what it's all about. And that's marketing. Ultimately, that's all we are. We are marketing a subject that is a little bit inaccessible to lots of people in some ways, but then it's very accessible in others. And all you're doing is taking on some basic PR tricks and presenting what we know in our hearts is amazing, and you're presenting what it is that we find amazing to an audience that doesn't necessarily get it yet.
That leads perfectly into this other question I have, which is the last question I really want to get onto because it's from a former professor of mine, Karim Vahid from the University of Derby. He says, "It's great to hear about the range of outreach activities the panel has engaged with. However, I get the feeling that the public perception of the importance of insects has grown over the last decade, but I'm frustrated with the way that mammals and birds still dominate the public view of animals." And this really bugs me too, because this is a common thing now I keep seeing everywhere is animals and insects, animals and invertebrates. Like, how do we tackle this, and how do we help the media with this marketing of insects? Adam.
Well, that's good timing because I've just posted it on the chat just as that question was coming in. Syrian and I looked at this and we formulated a structure to borrow from marketing. Right? If someone can persuade you to go and buy a new iPhone every year, or some other piece of tap that you don't need, right, or Coca-Cola, you don't get in the middle of nowhere. In the middle of nowhere in Honduras somewhere, and there'll be a can of Coke on the floor that someone's bought. If we can persuade people to buy those products, and these companies can be that wealthy, surely we should be able to persuade people to engage with the natural world. So our idea there was, well, let's look at how marketers do it. And there's one of the models they do is what's called the 4 Ps, which is promotion, place, price, and product. And it's all about knowledge and understanding. And we don't know enough about. I realise with Fran and Ashleigh, we've already had this discussion actually at some point, but we don't know enough about why people don't like insects. We don't know enough about our customer base, right? We don't know enough about why they don't like them. We don't know what sort of stories people respond to. We know they respond to stories, and we know we get great traction with all kinds of things, but this particular group of people, what would they respond to? How do we get these people engaged? And we don't. I guess if we frame it like a marketing problem, we have a great product that everybody fundamentally needs, but for some reason, a whole bunch of people not only think they don't need it, but are either unaware of it or find it repugnant. and we have to turn them around. And to do that, we have to learn much more about why they find, why do people not like insects? We just need to find out much more about that, I think, and more about people and their responses to it. So that's my kind of take on it. I think we need more data on this and more insight.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are drawing to a close here. I haven't even looked at any of the questions that Fran and I put together in advance of this, because you've had so many of your own, and we've had some great discussion. It's been so great to hear like multiple opinions on some of these. Fran, did you have one last one that you wanted to cover before we wrap things up?
I can't think of one right now, Ashleigh. I've been partly doing online stuff and partly trying to interact here. So I think it's been a really good discussion so far. So proceed as you wish.
Okay, well, for me then, of all the challenges of the last 8 months or whatever, can we each name one thing that either we enjoyed, that this is, by the way, out with your own ones that you've mentioned, so these are by other people, that you've enjoyed or inspired you, and how you will take this forward from 2020. So for me, it's the virtual workshops. I was a little bit nervous and apprehensive to do these before. So it's definitely upped my confidence being, so thank you very much to Kieran from FSC Biolinks. Got me out of my comfort zone there, and I'm very happy to participate and do more things like this in the future because I see the value in these resources. So that's from me. Helen?
I think for me, it's been seeing the surge in interest of wildlife on people's doorsteps and seeing the increase in recording and people committing to sending their data and their information to be shared far and wide to answer all kinds of questions and inform all kinds of decision making has been incredible. But also to see not just the new recorders, but the recorders who've been online for a long time, working so hard through lockdown to make sure that they send the feedback and take a look at people's records, and just our entomological community. It is incredible, and I think it's just really stepped up amazingly through lockdown in so many different ways, and that's just inspiring and not at all surprising. Of course, we knew that that would be the case, but it's nevertheless inspiring.
Absolutely. Richard?
Yeah, well, both of those things. I mean, I live right on in the Chilterns and walk in the hills around here most days. I help with the National Trust at Ashridge, and when lockdown started and people started coming out and walking up there a lot more, I began thinking to myself, what are all these people doing in my back garden? And then, you know, bit by bit it grew, and then you put your National Trust badge on and they start asking you directions, and then they start, and my National Trust badge says ask me about butterflies, and then they start talking about butterflies. So, you know, the sort of slight annoyance at seeing so many people out there very quickly turned to delight and engagement in conversation. So I think that's been absolutely marvellous. But I'd also go back from a professional entomology point of view, go back to what Ashleigh was saying about virtual meetings, and from the Royal ENTSOC's point of view, I really would like to see these sort of hybrid meetings taking off, where there is a base that people can come to and interact in person, but there's also a big screen, which means that people can take part from anywhere in the world. And at first I was very unsure about virtual meetings. We've had 7 or 8 special interest group meetings now that have been virtual. We've had fantastic turnouts, and the opportunity to combine the virtual with the real, I think, is the way to go from here on in.
I agree. Adam?
Well, I guess I'd echo everything that everyone said. I guess for me, I'd also add that, and I've seen this with other people as well, I'm always sort of saying to people, insects are the glue that binds things together. You've got to understand the bigger picture and ecology and stuff. And then, you know, my kids will go, what that plant's called? And I don't know, I don't do green stuff. But actually, I've started doing green stuff. And I've always been interested in birds, but actually I'm much more into it now. I've always got my binoculars with me now. So it's that crossover. And sort of Helen sort of talked about it as well. You know, I mean, she was crossing over within the insects, but it's a big step to go into moths. And it's that wider appreciation of the natural world, getting us out of that kind of silo. We all sort of know that it's there, and we're all kind of vaguely interested. But for me, I've sort of taken much more definitive, you know, definite steps into doing it. And for me, that's been really good. And I've seen, you know, on Twitter and Facebook and stuff, other people making similar kind of comments of, you know, I thought I was an insect person, but actually I'm liking birds now, and that sort of thing. And that's been really inspiring, I think.
I was one of those people. the birds got my attention briefly. I'd like to apologise as well, because the chat has been great and we've actually overrun by a couple of minutes already. So just 1 or 2 final minutes, and we'll go to Nick with his closing thoughts here.
Okay, well, I've been a naturalist, been a multidisciplinary naturalist as well. It's quite a lonely existence, weirdly enough. And I never really thought about it. You know, I do all this stuff on my own for the most part, and there's some teaching, and then even slightly lonely in its own way. So what this whole year has done is made me realise that actually it's okay to be multidisciplinary. You're actually quite useful. So picking on Adam's point, it's that holistic view of the world, and to realise there's a community out there who are the same is brilliant. Equally lonely, but equally interested in everything is really, really good. And when you've got a lifetime of telling these stories behind you, it's finding an outlet for that's really difficult. And I think this year's taught me that there is an outlet, and it's this box that I'm sitting in front of, or this box. And I've really enjoyed that engagement, and I feel I've got a purpose now, which I'll be honest with you, I was lost a little bit. And it's been good for me, it's been good for my head. And I feel that I can expand on this. I want to see more combining the real with the virtual. So I love the idea of more virtual real teaching, if that makes sense. So taking real things and teaching people about them via this medium is absolutely marvelous. So I'm going to that's my thought, I think.
I will never learn. Thank you, Nick, and thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. I didn't say at the beginning, but this is a very casual format for this meeting, and I really like it. It has been good and productive, and I wish that we could continue and go to the pub and continue all these discussions. We could chat for ages, couldn't we? But I think we should probably wrap it up here. Before we go, I would just like to signpost people to that vacancy on the Outreach and Development Committee. So please get in touch with Adam, drop Adam an email if you're interested in that. And also please drop Fran an email if you want to participate in any of the virtual plans for National Insect Week or any RES virtual meetings as such in the coming year. So with that, I think we will probably wrap up and say cheerio. Thank you very much for everybody that's attended. If you have any follow-up questions or feedback, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you, Adam's dropped his email in there. And that's it. So hopefully we have recorded this meeting, and we will be making it available in some shape or form. We can keep you all posted with that, and we will also be advertising things through the RES social media channels as well. So thank you for joining. Enjoy the rest of your days, and stay safe, everybody.
Thank you, Ashleigh.
Yeah, thank you, Ashleigh. Thank you, Fran. Thank you all. It's lovely to see you all. And I've been really enjoying all the chat. It's great.
Thank you all very, very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.